hosts, Athina Sitou,
Goldstein,
Pauline Hughes,
and Hilary Tao. The topic of this week is, you guessed it, thirst.
That's right. We all need to drink water for our bodies to function properly. It may seem simple, but experiencing the feeling of thirst is essential to regulating the amount of water we need in our bodies to stay healthy and well. So let's find out how our brains are involved in thirst.
Hey Hilary, what's your favorite drink?
Bubble tea all the way. You can drink and eat it at the same time.
Well, actually, that's a bad thirst quencher because of the high concentration of solutes in it. There's way too much sugar to properly hydrate you, and sugar is a solute. So is sodium. Actually, it's the most abundant solute in your body. When you get thirsty, it's because you have too many solutes and not enough water in your blood. And the principle of comparing the amount of solutes and water is what we call osmolality. With these definitions in mind, I think we can start trying to understand how thirst is regulated by the brain.
Here's what happens. When you become thirsty, you have a higher concentration of salt in your blood than normal, and this is called being hyperosmotic. There's a water deficit, and you're actually losing more water than salt. But how do you lose this water? You lose water because sodium goes where water flows. You're losing water through sweat evaporating and going for a wee. Your brain is able to detect when you have too much solute in your blood, and this is what happens when you're hyperosmotic. Hyperosmotic thirst is one type of thirst you can experience when you're dehydrated. And then there's another type of thirst called anticipatory thirst, and this is what happens after you eat, for example.
If you go to McDonald's and you eat a thing of French fries and you put 4 packs of salt on it, you've now ingested a huge salt load, 4 grams of salt. It's enough to increase your blood osmolality, and so you will become hyperosmotic from that.
This is Dr. Charles Bourque, a researcher at the McGill Centre for Research in Neuroscience and a professor in McGill's Neurology and Neurosurgery department.
Because you ate at McDonald's, you're experiencing anticipatory thirst. Then, to correct that thirst, you have to drink something dilute, something with a lot of water. Your brain also has a dedicated system to control anticipatory thirst in your biological clock.
Our brain has a circadian clock, which is a group of neurons in nuclei, and this clock has changes in electrical activity on a 24-hour cycle in it. And what we discovered was that there's a subset of neurons in the clock that activate thirst-promoting neurons at the end of the day, just before we go to bed. They stimulate thirst for an hour or two.
Let's switch gears a bit and talk about exercise. So I really like running outside, and I tend, against my better judgment, to not bring a water bottle with me. So as I'm running, I get thirsty. What happens in my brain as I don't drink water?
As you run, you generate a lot of body heat. You need to get rid of the body heat to conserve body temperature, and the best way we do that is through sweating. And sweating is a hypotonic fluid.
A fluid that has a high water content.
And therefore it provokes a water deficit in our body. So as time goes, blood sodium concentration goes up. You become hyperosmotic, hyponatremic. And there are the osmosensory or osmometer neurons in your brain detect that the sodium concentration is going up or that the osmolality is going up. And the osmolality detection is achieved by the fact that cells shrink when they're exposed to a hyperosmotic environment.
So cells shrink when water moves to the outside, where the concentration of solutes like sodium is greater.
Where sodium goes, water flows.
All cells in the body do this, but these ones have special molecules that allow them to tell the neurons, you better signal that this is happening, to tell your kidney you better reabsorb some of that water and stimulate thirst. You exercise and become hyperosmotic.
So the osmometer neurons sense the increasing concentration of sodium in our blood. They then signal to a front part of our brain and activate it in order to create the feeling of thirst.
Do athletes or runners experience thirst differently? Are they better at retaining water?
The quick answer is no. Water retention, which implies water reabsorption by the kidney. And water reabsorption by the kidney actually is compromised when we exercise, because while we exercise, blood flow to the kidney decreases, and that reduces the overall efficacy of the kidney during the exercise.
Meaning the kidneys are releasing less water while we exercise.
And the appropriate thing to do is to drink water. But if you don't drink water, you'll become dehydrated.
But it turns out, in the Boston Marathon, over 13% of the people running were found to be hyponatremic, the opposite of what you'd expect. Hyponatremia is a type of osmolality where the solute is sodium and there's too little sodium in their blood. That is, they were overhydrated, not dehydrated.
Because they're thirsty, and they drink, and they drink, and they drink, and they drink too much. And that's much more dangerous. It's much more dangerous for you to be hyponatremic than hypernatremic.
I would have expected that people running a marathon would become dehydrated from all the water they lose through sweating. But actually, it's more common for marathon runners to become overhydrated. They're drinking so much water that the solutes in their blood become diluted to dangerously low levels. This is known as hyponatremia, and people experiencing this kind of overhydration often have headaches, nausea, or confusion. But other consequences of overhydration can be also much more severe.
In California, every year you hear these stories on radio. A few years ago, a radio station had a competition for when one of the game consoles, one of the Wii, came out. The competition was hold your Wii for a Wii, and the contestants they had bottles of half a liter of water stacked up, and the contestants had to drink a bottle every 5 minutes and not go to the bathroom. And it's whoever could tough it out the longest would win the console. And the person who came in second died of hyponatremia. So yeah, hyponatremia is to be avoided. While it's true that overdrinking is dangerous, the important thing is to not overdrink in a very short period of time.
Oh my, that's quite a real-life example to illustrate the effects of overdrinking water. Because we're so concerned about dehydration, we often don't think about the other extreme, which is overhydration. That's quite shocking that contest was allowed to happen. Thinking back to osmolality, overhydration is caused when your blood is hypoosmotic, meaning that there's an excess of water outside your cells and more solutes in your cells. Then the water will migrate into your cells. Where sodium goes, water flows. And they will start to expand. The thing about our cells is that they do not have cell walls like plants. So our cells have no wall to push quite as strong when there is a large water intake. Instead, our cells burst, and this is what happened in the Wii for Wii.
So, thirst in the brain. Why do we care?
Water is the nutrient in our diet. You could go without eating for 3 weeks, but you could only go without water for 3 days. So, controlling water levels is vital, and it involves many organ systems, your brain, your kidneys, and all the biological signals that tell you to drink.
Next time you take a sip of water, appreciate how complex the regulation of thirst is.
Your body uses two systems of thirst, one in response to water deficits like when you sweat, and one in anticipation of water deficits like when you eat or before sleep. The balance between water and solutes in the blood is known as osmolality. When you lose water, blood sodium concentration goes up and your blood becomes hyperosmotic, aka hyponatremic. Osmometer neurons in your brain detect solute concentrations and tell other specialized neurons that you need to hydrate and should drink water. This is the perception of thirst. So when you're thirsty, your body's telling you that you're dehydrated and you should do something about it, like drinking a fluid. But be aware of hyponatremia. When you're overhydrated, the concentration of solutes in your blood is below normal, and it's going to be even more dangerous than dehydration.
We'd like to thank our interviewee, Dr. Charles Bourque, Professor of Neuroscience at McGill University, and Catherine Hardin, Professor of Communicating Science at McGill University. Our script research and writing was done by Athina, Sitou, Goldstein, Pauline, Hughes, and Hilary Tao. Our theme music was scored by Goldstein. Our editing and sound production was done by Hilary Tao and Goldstein. Our cover art was illustrated by Pauline Hughes.